Welcome back. We're ready to start restructuring our code. Now the first thing we're going to do is create our combat state enum, and we're going to put that in the shooter character class. So here we are up at the top of shooterCharacter.h, and we're ready to create our combat state enum. It's going to be a scoped enum, so we're going to type enum class, and this will be eCombatState. We're going to use uint8 just like we did with our ammo type enum, and we're going to add the three states here. So I'm going to highlight this state from eAmmo type and paste it here. And instead of EAT, we're going to use ECS as our abbreviation. So ECS stands for eCombatState. So this first state will be the unoccupied state. And we're going to use unoccupied as the display name as well. Now our next state is going to be for when the fire timer is in progress. So it'll be called ECS fire timer in progress. And we're going to use fire timer in progress as the display name. We can copy this line and paste it here. And this one will be the reloading state. And that will be the display name is reloading. Now I'm going to copy this constant. And I'm going to call this ECS max, and we'll leave its display name as default max. So now we have the eCombat state. Now we can create a variable of this type. We're going to go down all the way to the bottom of our private variables section, and we're going to create an eCombat state called combat state. Now this is going to be a uProperty. And combat state should be set from C++, so we're going to make this visible anywhere. Blueprint read only. And the category will be combat. And we'll need the meta specifier. We'll give this a comment, and we'll say combat state can only fire or reload if unoccupied. So we have this combat state, and in shooterCharacter.cpp we can give this variable a default value, and I'd like to give it the value of eCombatState unoccupied. So it's ECS unoccupied. And I'll give this a comment as well and say combat variables. Okay, so we're ready to go ahead and start restructuring our code. Now here's our improved version of fire button pressed. All it does is sets B fire button pressed to true and tries to fire the weapon. So let's implement that. So here in shooterCharacter.cpp, let's find fire button pressed. Now here we have fire button pressed. Now all we need to do is set fire button pressed to true. And instead of starting the fire timer, we're going to simply call fire weapon. So that takes care of fire button pressed. Now here is our improved version of fire weapon. We want to check our state to see if we're unoccupied, otherwise return. And then in fire weapon, we check to see if we have ammo and then do our visuals and start the fire timer. So let's go ahead and implement that. So here we are in fire weapon. Now the first check we make is if the equipped weapon is null. That's a pretty good check to make, so we're going to leave that there. But next we have to check our combat state. So we're going to say if combat state is not equal to eCombatState ECS unoccupied. If we're not unoccupied, we can simply return as well because we're not in a state where we could fire the weapon. The next thing we want to do is check to see if the weapon has ammo. So we're going to say if, and we're going to call our function weapon has ammo. If the weapon does have ammo, then we can go ahead and continue with our weapon firing function. And the rest of this stuff is all visuals. Here's playing the sound. Here we have the barrel socket that we're getting, and in which case we're going to display the muzzle flash. We're going to create the smoke beam. We have our get beam end location, which performs our line traces. And then we spawn our impact particles. And at the end here, we play our animation montage. And we call decrement ammo, and we perform a check for equipped weapon, but remember, we just put a check for equipped weapon at the very top, so we don't need to check equipped weapon anymore. We can take this out of that if check, and now we just subtract one from the weapon's ammo. So all of this stuff can all go inside if weapon has ammo. Now, in order to make this function look a lot neater, I'd like to abstract away some of these things. And we'll start off by commenting each thing that we would like to abstract away into its own function. For example, right here, we're playing the fire sound. So let's say play fire sound here. Now the next part here, where we get our barrel socket, check that, get our barrel socket transform, create the muzzle flash, get the beam end location. All of this stuff centers on and depends on the line traces performed in get beam end location. Get beam end location is going to handle all of these. And so these are all pertaining to the line tracing in get beam end location. Get beam end location does a lot of heavy lifting. In fact, inside of get beam end location, if we peek that, this is where we actually get an F hit result that can contain an actor that we've hit. So later on, when we want to, say, cause damage or something like that, this is actually going to be the F hit result that will contain that actor that we'll want to deal damage to. So really, get beam end location and all of its associated bits of code surrounding it have to do with sending that bullet out and hitting something with it. So let's call this section of code send bullet. Since sending a bullet involves performing the line trace and hitting an actor, and so later on when we want to deal damage, we'll look into send bullet, which will be the name of the function we abstract all of this away to. Next we have the animation montage play, so we're going to go ahead and call this play hip fire montage. And then this here doesn't need to be abstracted because it's just a single function call. So we're going to create functions for play fire sound, send bullet, and play hip fire montage. Let's go ahead and declare these functions in shooterCharacter.h, and these will be protected. So let's make these void functions. So the first one will be play fire sound. Next will be send bullet. And finally, play hipfire montage. In fact, we might as well call this play gunfire montage, because we don't always fire from the hip, sometimes we'll be aiming. So we have these three functions. Let's go ahead and create some function bodies for these. There's send bullet. And here's play gunfire montage. There we go. Now in shooterCharacter.cpp, we're going to take this play fire sound functionality, copy that, and put it into our play fire sound function here. So here we have play fire sound, and we can simply call this in fire weapon. And we'll do that here in the check to see if weapon has ammo. And we don't need this anymore here. So next we have send bullet. And that's going to be all this here, all the way up to playing the hip fire montage. So we're going to search for send bullet, and we'll put all that functionality here. So back in fire weapon, we'll simply call send bullet here. And so we can delete all the code here for the send bullet functionality. And finally, we have this code for playing the hipfire montage. So let's copy that and go to our new function play gunfire montage. And we'll paste this in here. and we'll simply call that in fire weapon. So here we'll call play gunfire montage, and we can delete that. And then calling equipped weapon decrement ammo can just go right in here inside the check to see if we have ammo. So now fire weapon looks like it makes more sense. We simply check to see if the weapon has ammo, and then we play the fire sound, send the bullet, play the gunfire montage, decrement the ammo, and finally, in weapon has ammo, one last thing we can do is start the fire timer. So we can call start fire timer. And that's all fire weapon needs to do. So let's take a look at our plan for start fire timer. So here, according to our plan, start fire timer should simply set our combat state to fire timer in progress. And then it should use get world timer manager to set timer. That's all it should do. So let's implement that. So here's our function. We actually called it start fire timer rather than set fire timer. So the first thing we want to do is set combat state equal to e combat state fire timer in progress. And we're not going to handle firing the weapon. We don't need B should fire anymore. So we're going to delete that if check. And we don't need to set B should fire to false. All we need now is get world timer manager set timer like this. So this will simply set the timer and auto fire reset will be the callback. Now let's take a look at our plan for auto fire reset. Here's our plan for auto fire reset. We're just going to set our combat state back to unoccupied. Then we check to see if we have ammo. And if we do, we'll check to see if our fire button is still pressed, in which case we'll try to fire the weapon again. Don't worry about reload weapon just yet. We haven't created a reload function. We'll take care of that soon. So let's implement this. So here's auto fire reset. I'll go ahead and just delete these and we'll just say, first and foremost, we'll set our combat state equal to e combat state, and it's going to be unoccupied. Next, we'll check to see if the weapon has ammo. So if weapon has ammo. Now, don't worry about checking to see if we have the equipped weapon. If we peek the definition for weapon has ammo, we check that here. So if the weapon does have ammo, then we want to see if we have fire button pressed. So we're going to check if B fire button pressed, then we can simply call fire weapon. So that's all we need to do. Now, if weapon has ammo is false, then right here is where we can go ahead and call reload weapon. So we can just add a comment for now and say reload weapon. And once we're ready to implement reloading, we'll stick a call there to our function for reloading. So once again, here's the plan that we just implemented. And here's what it looks like with our C++ code. We now have our fire button pressed function, which sets B fire button pressed to true and calls fire weapon. Next, fire weapon will check our state to see if we're unoccupied, otherwise return, and then check to see if we have ammo, do all the visuals like play fire sound, send the bullet which performs the trace and creates the beam, we play the gunfire montage, and we decrement ammo. Then we start the fire timer. The start fire timer function sets the combat state to ECS fire timer in progress and actually sets the timer. And at the end of that time, auto fire reset is the callback for that, which sets our state back to unoccupied. And we check to see if there's ammo. If there is no ammo, we're going to reload, but we'll handle that in a future video. But if there is ammo, we check to see if the fire button is still pressed. If so, we call fire weapon again. Now before we compile, we're going to need to add our uenum macro just above the eCombat state, so that way it's recognized by the Unreal Header tool. So don't forget to add uenum just above eCombat state. And then go ahead and compile. Okay, we're back in the editor. We're ready to test this out, and weapon firing is working. So we've simplified our weapon firing code greatly. And now that we have our code looking like this, we're prepared to add reload weapon functionality, and it'll be easy because we now have an enum combat state that will prevent us from doing anything that we're not allowed to do at the time. In other words, we need to have the unoccupied state to enter into any state that requires us to not be doing something else. So now in the videos to come, we're ready to implement reloading functionality. So we'll see you in the next video.